Welcome to the Digital Forester podcast, where we talk to foresters about how they are using digital technologies in their day-to-day forestry work. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Digital Forester podcast. Today, I'm joined by Simon Ackerman from somewhere in South Africa, right, Simon? So you got to bring me up to speed. Where are you these days?
Yeah, hi, Kevin. Great to meet or to chat to you tonight. It's been a while. How things have changed in the last couple of years. I'm based with Stellenbosch University in Stellenbosch, which is in the Western Cape, but lucky enough to be, well, I work for Stellenbosch University, but I'm based in probably one of the more prettier provinces of the country, in KwaZulu-Natal, up in the east coast of South Africa, in a place called Pietermaritzburg. It's been in the news for all the wrong reasons. I don't know if you've heard.
Tell our listeners.
We had a spate of unrest about a couple of weeks ago, which was a little bit unpleasant. Negative side of South Africa. We had political challenges with an ex-president and people deciding that they should loot for a couple of days. So it was a bit nervous. But anyway, Pietermaritzburg is a lovely place. It's in the middle of our big timber growing area. All the major timber companies here, and it's going into summer, so it's getting hotter and greener. That's basically where we are.
Now, when was the last time we saw each other? I think it was in Pietermaritzburg. Was it at a conference or was it at an event? But it was a while ago. I think
it was a good
10
few
years,
years ago. It was
8 years.
No, not that long ago. I was still working at the ICFR. You were meeting with Mark Norris Rogers just before he retired.
Right, Mondi.
It was at the ICFR, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was during that it was your second or third visit back.
Yeah,
I think
that's right.
You and Mark were doing a bit of a roadshow through the country.
Yeah, that's right. That's what we call it, the roadshow, which for those who haven't been to South Africa, beautiful. I still fondly remember it, more for reasons of being completely clueless to the geography. I think we were in Cape Town, and then I met somebody, and they said, you know what, it'd be great if you could come chat with us over in George. And I'm like, yeah, sure, no problem. And they're like, how about tomorrow? I'm like, yeah, no problem. Like, I thought George was like a suburb. And then I remember talking to someone, they're like, really, are you leaving at 4 a.m. the next day? I'm like, why would I leave at 4 a.m. for like a suburb? And they're like, George is like a 5-hour drive from Cape Town. And I thought, oh my God, like, what did I commit ourselves? And we did the drive anyways, but that's a side story. So, hey, it's great to see you. Awesome to reconnect. I'm really excited to have this discussion with you because some of our previous pods have been in the Earth observation, LiDAR, UAV, all sorts of different things, which I know you're involved with in your research program and you're advising to industry, but also you're on the machinery side, I believe, in terms of forest operations. So I'm going to be curious to pick your brain, but maybe to kick things off. I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask anyways. Tell me how you became a forester. What's that connection?
It probably stems to a familial connection. My dad was a forester for government forestry in South Africa, and we've lived on plantations our whole lives, well, until high school and varsity. So it was never an intention to become a forester. I chose forestry as a career, as a second choice. I wanted to do something else, and then didn't have the marks, and forestry was my second choice to get into varsity, and I got it. And
so what was the first choice? What was the first choice? Tell us.
Physiotherapy, for some odd reason. I thought I enjoy working with people, and I thought I could apply that sort of enjoyment and interpersonal skill through doing physio. And in hindsight, I'm glad I didn't.
True enough. So forestry took you down that path. You studied and you're still studying. I believe when we were exchanging emails, you're in the thesis. I call a thesis rage, where you're writing your dissertation. For those who have done grad school, probably are chuckling right now. But tell us what you're up to right now.
Yeah, I'm in the final throes of a Ph.D. So 2 papers have to be finished soon, and then just finalizing everything. It's a bit sort of a broad forest operations research topic, looking at intertree or tree variability and operational efficiency of machines and systems. So that's where we occupying the stress in my life, and I wake up at 3 a.m. worrying about it. But yeah, so it is the thesis rage.
Thesis rage indeed, and we'll talk more about that. So thinking, I'm hearing, your dad had a connection to forestry. You kind of followed suit in the end in that space. Tell me about the type of work you've been involved, or maybe let's back up. So for our listeners who don't know commercial forestry in South Africa, maybe give us the forestry 101, a lot of plantations, eucalyptus, edonia, some other things, but maybe and refresh myself in terms of what's commercial forestry like in South Africa.
Yeah, so it's exceptionally fast growing. We focus around two genuses, I suppose that's the right word. So we pine saw timber for pulp, for a diminishing pulp market, and then mainly saw timber for structural timber and ply, and then a massive pulp market looking at eucalyptus, ranging from, and our terrain is sort of from subtropical coastal right up to temperate into the high veld. Short rotations, our fastest growing pulp sites under correction grow up to between 7 and 9 years in their maturity. Wow. And then our saw timber between 20 and maximum 25 to 30 years. So it's a very short rotation, and you're getting, our saw timber rotations, you're getting big timber, thin, which is artificially sort of managed to get the best quality by thinnings. So you're getting just under a cube to just over a cubic meter pine saw timber tree out of the thing, where they merchandise that for ply and for structural timber, and then of course the bulk product, which is eucalyptus, which is just cut up into little pieces and sent to the mill and masticated, and then very cool pulp.
So what type of, before we jump into maybe poking a little bit more about your research and how you're interacting with industry, because if I remember correctly, when we first met, like that was a bit of your role, kind of liaison with industry and researchers and all that jazz. But maybe thinking about forestry in South Africa right now, would it be safe to say, hand felling still a large portion of operations, or have we really gone mechanized now going forward? Or maybe give us a lay of the land of how operations might look like.
Yeah, operations they've moved dramatically from motor manual operations. So I suppose you can look at it in two, sort of like almost two ranges. You have the medium to small scale landowner, which is ranging from 1 hectare to maybe 500 to 1,000 hectares. And their economies of scale still pretty focused on a motor manual component, so chainsaw felling and tractor extraction and manual, lots of labor, because they're still a rural employer. But if you go into the big corporates, anything from 5,000 to up, perhaps on scales aren't quite right, but up to hundreds of thousands of hectares, they have the economies of scale and the requirement to produce timber quickly. So you've got mechanized systems on that. Looking at cutter length systems, so harvester forward is very few tree length or feather bunching systems, but it's so the lay of land is definitely moving away from manual through the availability of labor, decent work, and productivity and safety. So it's key.
For sure. Yeah, it's absolutely amazing to hear you say that. No matter who we talk to and where, it seems like skilled workforce is a theme that everyone's bumping into, finding the right people to actually to do the work. So very cool. So thinking of from a technology point of view, what does that look like in South Africa? Are you launching, a drone out of your backpack to fly LiDAR for compartments? Do you have a national program for terrain mapping, or is it mostly spaceborne, or is it aerial photography, or kind of what, maybe help myself and our listeners understand what the current readiness is for technology in general?
I think the readiness is there. It's once again boils down to scale. The big corporates have embarked on massive LiDAR campaigns from fixed wing aircraft. So the two big ones, the Sappies and the Mondies, have basically covered the entire landholding they have a LiDAR terrain map and a LiDAR base set for everything. There is, as far as I'm aware, no national program to do national inventory or it's everything's done sort of on a localized level. There's a massive appetite for that, for the technology. We are, yeah, so the biggest barriers to the whole thing is that it's nice if you've got a fixed wing, if you've got a registered pilot to do all the big areas, but if you go into a localized scale, we battle with legislation. Drone or UAV legislation hampers us a bit. You have to almost be a fully fledged Boeing pilot to be able to use the things.
Oh wow!
But it's not that bad, but the process is quite laborious, which I think we've just done a series of workshops, and we're busy on a project looking at how we can increase awareness and get a bit of value add for people using UAVs and the information you can get from them. So that's been quite eye-opening, and looking at legislative things. Yeah, so ideally, every forester should have a drone that you just have a look. You can quick and easily view your land, the land holding or your landscape that you're dealing with, collect data from that, process it, and then make informed decisions. But I think we're still in the point where it's a nice tool. It yields fantastic information, but we're still working on the baby steps.
Right.
So there are a lot of people that say they can do the work. They can go out there and fly, and they can produce what you want. But as soon as you start talking to them, you realize that it's quite far-fetched.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't understand exactly.
Yeah, I think when I was down last time and when we saw each other, cost was still a cost in general for anything for that matter, was prohibitive. I guess cost prohibitive. Is that still the case, or have there new players on the ground now that are forcing prices down, or what's that landscape look like in terms of vendors and suppliers in your neck of the woods?
I think technology, the ability to deal with it has improved. So there are a few core suppliers, and they've got long-term relationships with the people that have commissioned the work. I think the quality of the data and the ability to deal with the data has improved. So the skill sets within the organizations. So it is still expensive, but I think the way the work or the outcomes and the solutions that they've found by using said data have improved the value add. So the guys with the checkbook are a little bit more interested in signing the checks than they were. We're still sitting in the discussions I have with the partners I work with. I'm still in a sort of a liaison position with a few industry partners, and between us and the university, is that it's becoming if you dare to use the word, it's a sexy tool. So it's nice that you can make 3D maps, you can get volumetric information from things, you can identify trees, but it's how much, what are you willing to pay for the quality of the data? It's becoming more acceptable, and I think people are realizing that it's actually almost vital that we get this timeless information. But it is, if you throw in the licensing, you throw in the hardware, the weather conditions. On a recent deployment or a recent project, I think we had to deploy he was supposed to be a professional contractor about 4 times before we actually got the data back. And then also you realize that this guy really didn't know what he was talking about. So that's that whole story. But he was only had to travel. Yeah, I only traveled 40 kilometers, but he was still moaning about everything and then trying to tell us what we didn't. We knew what we wanted, and he wanted to try and persuade us that we wanted something else.
Right. So thinking of your role, if we kind of start maybe going backwards in time, the ICFR side of things, maybe tell us about the purpose of that organization, your role, and maybe some of those key technological things you were involved with at that time, because I'll be curious to see where you are right now, and even with your own research, that progression of through time, how that technology has evolved from the South African landscape. So maybe share with us some of the those stories and the type of work you've been involved with while during your ICFR days.
Yeah, ICFR was I think it was quite an applied set of work. I was very much a project manager or a program manager, trying to just deal with a whole bunch of partners, trying to keep everyone happy with it. We had a direction, but it was very difficult to bring everyone together. The big projects we worked on, we got some good projects. Nothing. There are a lot of technology transfer, a couple of sort of optimization projects that I started there, which never really, by the time it was reaching this maturity, then I had left the ICFR. So it was a very much a liaison technology transfer post, not massive projects or not academic impact there, but it was a lot of herding cats. But it was a good breeding ground for me to get experience within the industry and to get to know who was there. Which is it's mature. Yeah.
And what does ICFR stand for, Simon?
It's the Institute for Commercial Forestry Research.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, the institute built its reputation up on applied silviculture research and tree breeding, and then I brought an operations side into it through originally working for FISA, which is Forest Engineering South Africa, which is very much a gold nut, the hardcore machines and roads and timber transport and processing, to operations where we started looking more at the supply chain,
right,
and then to where I am now. Yeah.
Right. So that might be a good segue. As I mentioned on some previous podcasts, we end up talking about some of the usual suspects of technology, geospatial technology. Maybe that's just bias from the world I'm coming from, but I'd love to pick your brain, if that's the right term, or explore what you're working on now. So when we talk about machinery, heavy equipment, productivity, performance, those are all in your wheelhouse, and you correct if I'm wrong, but I'm curious to understand, what are you seeing on the technology landscapes? Like you mentioned, mostly dealing with cut to length equipment, so the harvester's forwarder model. What are you seeing on the landscape in terms of change in technology? Is it largely steady state? The cut to length equipment coming in, or are they getting better? And if so, how? So maybe kind of educate myself in terms of what are some of those key research things that you're working on, and then why they're relevant to the industry players, not just in your neck of the woods, but truthfully anywhere in the world.
Yeah, I think the move towards mechanization is continuing. So it is the traditional sort of cut to length processes, looking at more at the purpose-built machines versus the hybridized machines. So we have a huge fleet of excavator-based harvesters, and I don't know if you can call it sort of construction tractors that are used to extract. And those have their purpose because the capital costs are more favorable, and they're not imported, and you can sell them on as an excavator after you're done. Technology-wise, I think there's a realization that you can't just apply a system to a landscape, and that goes for and the work I'm doing. We're trying to work across the barriers, so we don't work just in harvesting. We work in silviculture harvesting, and then we try and bring measurements in on top of that, so we can actually understand what's going on while we're doing the particular work. So in the traditional systems, it's the cut to length harvester forwarder, and it's now moving towards how can we've got to that almost that technology frontier where we're sitting, where the productivity is good, the safety is good, everything's sort of working nicely, but what can we do to improve it? And that's where we've seen huge interest in the data, the data sets that are coming out of that. So the Stanford D protocol, what measurements you can get out of that, and how can you improve those measurements? So through calibration. So the projects that I've worked on looking at harnessing Stanford data to develop long-term models on machine performance, productivity, and cost, and how we can understand the machine working within a particular landscape and on different tree sizes. We've also looked at calibration and the benefit of calibration, and once again harnessing these data sets to understand that we can actually improve our operation, and we can run a lot more from the information we acquire from these machines. And then going into tracking and looking at terrain-based yield maps, and how can we manage our terrain, our resource on a particular land base. So that's something that we as in my group are starting to look at, is looking at mapping and measuring of trees from UAVs, where the bigger companies are, through their LiDAR data sets and applying some photogrammetry on top, are getting that fine scale terrain data, being slope and roughness, right up to what resource is sitting there, where the resource is, and then I think the next step is, how can we best apply our machinery resource to get the best optimized product for the market. Right. So not really, yeah. So, and I mean, in the harvesting side, that's that. Excuse me, dog is just knocking my feet here. So on the harvesting side, that's probably where we're looking. Silviculture, massive move. I suppose it's a progressive move from very manual operations to manual assisted. Once again, looking at using retrospective tree data, where the tree was, what the growth was, and what the and using those parameters as clues to where we can expect better performance. So on the precision forestry side, on the where we plant, can we get better performance on our plantings? How can we manage our site in terms of where we plant and how we plant? Mechanized pitting, preparing the holes for the plants, understanding weed management through, one of the wild ideas is using those big UAV drones to apply spot chemicals to problem areas, visualizing weeds and counting trees. There's a huge interest in companies like Skylab, because they're quite prominent in the marketing. Their marketing is very good. Everyone thinks that they can provide the one fit solution to everything, which I'm not. I mustn't diss them. I think it's very exciting what they're doing. But I think we're moving towards that, and we have the skill sets to work through these processes and understand it effectively within our industry.
So I'm curious, Simon, to pick your brain. In some work that we're dealing with is around productivity, and whether it's productive machine hours or utilization at the equipment level, or if we look, let's say, to Latin America, they're like, oh, it's not they don't care about that, but performance is more defined as, did you thin the right tree that was supposed to be thin, or how many trees did you harvest per some unit, per se. In South Africa, in your work, I guess, what are you seeing on the performance side? Like, are there, like you mentioned, obviously slope and terrain roughness, like those are some usual ones, but is there anything that's popping out in your findings in terms of that cut to length technology that's surprising you in terms of a factor for productivity?
I think one of the big ones is I suppose we historically, and maybe I can't generalize across the world, but we have an approach where we apply the biggest machine with the biggest engine and the biggest harvesting head to a landscape, or to a target. And I think it's some of the work that we've done recently. I think that's moving. We have to move away. With the resolution of the information we have, we can move away from that. So we don't have to incur massive capital cost in buying a machine. And this goes from using a big excavator to pit holes, to having a massive harvester cutting gum pulp. We have enough information to move away from these big capital cost items to understanding that we can be selective in what we do. And we have enough information on planning systems to be able to predict better. We've done a lot of time studies on the basics, so we know the relationship between tree size and efficiency, but I think we can move away from the average tree size for a compartment or a stand down to almost classes within the site, because we have that resolution of data.
Right. And what do you think? I'm hearing like right sizing the iron or the piece of equipment for
exactly
what you're harvesting. Why do you think people are buying bigger, better? Do you think it's the OEM manufacturers just doing a great job at selling, or it's really just the fact that we don't know, so we're just going bigger just to cover our basis? What are your thoughts on that, based on what you're seeing there?
Yeah, I think that's the thing, is that the bigger the better. We know that the bigger machine will do everything, but I think we can move with a bit more finesse. So it's sharpening the blades to make sure that we don't just go in there and just mess it all up. Not mess it up, but just apply one fix.
Right.
I'm sure the OEM suppliers are doing very well, because there's also probably an impression that we need robust machines to deal with potentially an illiterate operator, an operator that, I mean, it sounds really bad, but I think our labor force, can be from, they know how to, our labor force can, yeah, how do you put it? We deal with a semi-skilled labor force. We have an operator who's trained, he can use the machine, understands everything, but when you move away from purchasing a highly technical harvester with a computer system that gives you a lot of information, because the person that is operating that particular machine can't use the computer, is given limited access to the computer. It's one size fits all. They just make sure it cuts roughly the right length, and they just deal with it as it does. Right. So, and it was big, robust machines with limited bells and whistles, not very technical, just to get the job done. Our skill force our labor force is improving. We get better jobs. We pay the operators better, and because they get paid better, there's still a requirement of a bit more skill,
right,
to do it, and they're professionals. So.
Right. Well, I think what you're saying in some way, and it's prevalent elsewhere, is your workforce is only skilled to the extent that they're well educated and training's invested in them, and that's the same thing. I remember when I was visiting last time, that was an issue of finding the right people to operate these pieces of machinery. That in some respects, it's kind of funny, because when you think about forestry, everything's got to be easy. You make it too complicated, it's like the best of us are still not going to figure out how to work the damn thing. So very, very interesting. So thinking of operations down in your neck of the woods. So thinking of, you mentioned at the start there, you're doing your PhD research, investigating some of these things. Tell me a little bit more about that, the interplay between some of the technology that you're seeing, you've been involved with your PhD research. Is there a connection, or is this really more a different thing on the forest science side of things?
I think the PhD was sort of birthed on an understanding, or trying to understand the effect of tree size. I thought I was flying into Nelspruit, and I was looking at the orchards, or the orange groves below. As you fly into Nelspruit, it's full of oranges before you get to Salvia and the pine trees. It's beautiful. And you look at the different crowns, and you see the spacing, and we all know that those affect the tree, the stem. And I had this idea that how can we predict, not predict, but how can we measure what's there before we harvest it? And the idea was looking at tree variability and capacity, and how we can understand the effect of this resource on our bottom line, be it optimization to a particular product, to transport, and to the mill. So I'm trying to build the skill set, but I'm working on more probably the pure forest operation side. So I'm looking at the machine data. I've got a whole set of data which I've processed, and that paper is just being accepted. Looking at models and how we can, So I looked at a big set of data, applied and I thought it was quite a challenging modeling approach to it, and we found it quite interesting things. Looking at the sweet spots, looking at how the machine's performance across a set of trees, how it accelerates, it peaks, and then drops off. And
so what was the sweet spot you found?
Yeah, so I had 2 capacity machines, and I found the culmination of the productivities. I should know the data, but I can't remember it now.
No worries, okay.
So it was quite cool. Well, interesting is that you had a massive range from very small trees to very big trees. And you had a large capacity machine who had a smaller capacity machine. It was fantastic to see how the data sets, the models moved sort of equally across this to a point, and they diverged, and then the one machine just carried on with a slight dip, and then suddenly the smaller machine just dropped off at a certain capacity.
Okay.
It was nice to see. It made me feel a little bit better about myself.
Validated your thinking.
Yeah, validated my thinking, and then just looking and on that trend, looking at tree size and site, and then through a project that we got awarded through our industry body, Forestry South Africa, as well, which is administered a government grant. We've furthered that, looking at our developing UAV and photogrammetry skills, which I'm trying to apply in the next paper, which is still in its infancy. So that's technology-wise, it fascinates me, and I'm trying to build the skills up to work with that kind of those data. But it is cool. So the biggest highlight was that big data set.
Yeah.
And taking that, now we know that there's a tree size effect, and we can quantify it. And how can we look at distributions of trees if we skew the distributions to the smaller to the bigger with certain ranges, and what does that affect on the machine? And then going right down to I've got a LiDAR data set of a big compartment which I want to apply my machine data with fine scale tree data, and so tease some nice metrics out of that.
Yeah, for sure. Very cool. Very cool.
I digressed a bit there, but I think it really made sense.
No, it's great. I like it's there's a research side of things, and as I said, it's a different view on technology, but equally important. It's not always about maps and Earth observation, space observation, remote sense. Like forestry's boots on the grounds, right? Machines on the ground.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
this is trust me, there's a lot of people I talk to that are fascinated with the area of your research and are actively asking similar questions around productivity and performance and trying to understand things, which truthfully for me, I'm always surprised, coming more from a pure tech point of view. How can you not know this before you just dropped whatever $500,000 on that piece of iron? Like, surely, being a forester, you're doing your cost benefit analysis, but hey, sometimes you buy the biggest thing that you can afford and just do what you got to do, for sure.
Exactly.
I'm curious to understand more in South Africa from a capacity point of view. We talked about there's skilled shortage of skilled workers, not just foresters in general, but operators. I'm probably sensing also like just operating some of this technology. If you're researching it in the labs, maybe aside from the corporates, maybe there's not as many smaller organizations fully adopting this technology because maybe you haven't done the knowledge transfer or the case studies and the workshops and whatnot. But in terms of capacity building within South Africa for foresters to adopt new digital technologies, anywhere from the machine to like GIS to machine learning, you name it, what does that look like? Is obviously Stellenbosch is a well-known university. I remember when I traveled there, it's one of the flagship universities with forestry and forest science. But what does it look like on the lay of the land? Do you feel like there's a lot of investment going into technology, forest technology, or do you feel like it's still just kind of trucking along and doing its thing?
I think it's there's a lot more going into it. But that's the scale. it's the companies that are able, or groups that are able to spend the money on the resources and to get it done. Internally and within our group, we've got a huge, well, let's start again. So we are improving our skill sets. So we have a big push into data science. We have a connection through our group, through forest operations at Stellenbosch University, into data science. We have a postdoc starting within the School of Data Science. Stellenbosch University has just established, or had established, a School of Data Science with agri-sciences as one of the key components to it. And with within agri-sciences, forest operations has become our forestry component. So we have a postdoc working on that. So there's a need. I think we are, as foresters that have been trained, we do a bit of GIS and we have an awareness of LiDAR, but we're not pursuing that as much as we could. So we get the skills in from geoinformatics and geography, which are fantastic, because those people, the people that they're producing there are incredible. They cross border and they work. Right. The ability is there. But it'll be nice as we progress, and on our master's level, we're starting there, getting our students into projects that use these data and this technology. So it is a scale thing. I think we need to get in terms of research and tertiary education, we need to become a lot more skilled, and we need to start getting project ideas and start testing the waters and getting our company partners in on board to understand what we want to do, and also then with enthusiasm become to support us, which they are. So yeah, we've been lucky with the project that we've just had. All that has come to an end now that we've managed to produce or are producing a few master students on high-tech solutions to forestry problems. And it's the first time that not the first time, but it's one of the more recent approaches that we've managed to do.
Yeah, very cool. Well, it comes down to the readiness of the community and the industry as a whole. There's no point trying to push something, the boulder up the hill only to get steamrolled by the damn thing because someone's not ready for it, right? So I always say with foresters, there's a sweet spot. There's a right time where they're ready to adopt the technology or ask some of those questions to go forward. I'm going to shift our discussion a little bit. I know you mentioned supply chain. You mentioned the trucking side of things. Tell me more about what's happening in that world from a technology point of view. Are these trucks rigged with electronic logging devices? Are we tracking them? Are we monitoring them for performance, thinking of fuel burn or cycle times, whatnot? What can you share on that front in terms of what's happening in South Africa?
Yeah, I think in terms of the big contractors, that's definitely what they're doing. Okay. It's one of the things we haven't really focused on in the recent past. I think tracking and logistics is massive.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the tracking, the rudimentary tracking that they do through their fleet management systems and the fuel burn and the cycle times. I think probably one of the more professional contractors in the country are transport contractors. Also we have the move away from the standard truck configurations to PBS trucks. So we have a lot of extra length, extra low, extra volume trucks on the road.
So forgive my ignorance. PBS trucking help this guy out.
The performance-based standard. So it's this is testing me. Yeah. So the theory is that you can extend your truck size and configuration to have more load. So you have so your rand per ton kilometer goes down. You have less trucks on the road for the same volume, and it's an abnormal load basically.
Okay.
So it moves from up to I think it's a 45-ton capacity, if not more. And don't quote me on that, but yeah. So
what didn't your PhD supervisor tell you, Simon, that this is like a pre-test of your dissertation.
Pre-test, yeah.
I'm here to grill you to get you warmed up. Did they tell you that? I'm just joking, of course.
No, it's good to getting there. And it's funny, I've got it in my mind's eye. I've got a student working on a supply chain project where she's simulating our forestry supply chain. And
Cool.
She's been hounding me for these random questions. And she's probably asked me so many times, I blanked out what she's asked me. Yeah, so she's doing a technomatics simulation from seedling arriving at the stand right through to intake at the mill, which is a massive thing. And she's probably written far too much, but she's done really well. So it's
very cool. Very cool.
So yeah.
So thinking. Sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, so I suppose the biggest technology in our transport focus is less trucks on the road.
Right.
So these PBS trucks are specialist drivers, very well monitored. They simulate the routes. They've got there's less accidents. There's less fuel burn. There's so many potential benefits from it. And it's not just. It started in forestry. They took the idea from the Aussies and their road trains. And we've worked in forestry, and now the PBS system is throughout fuel transport into people transport. What else did I see the other day? So the most remarkable one is a big field truck, and massive field truck. Yeah, so it's that theory. So how can you safely apply bigger loads across because we've got too many trucks, and our rail system is not as effective as it used to be.
Yeah. And thinking of more recently, well, not more recently, in general, I guess, climate change and the role of forestry in climate change. What does that mean in South Africa? Like over here in North America, like there's a lot of press in the climate tech space in terms of, carbon market, carbon exchanges and carbon credits. Is this something that's happening as well in South Africa, or is it maybe a bit more muted than North America? What are your thoughts on that?
We have a carbon tax challenge. It's arriving or it's coming. So I'm not exactly sure on the nuts and bolts of it, but the carbon tax is here, and that's a mitigation measure towards climate change. Our forestry landscape has often been the scapegoat towards water use and those challenges. So so in terms of so climate change, it's there. We're seeing it within our growing areas, and we're seeing it in our rainfall events. So it's there. We have to become a little more climate smart with the species that we've breed for particular sites. So our sites are either getting more rain, or they're getting less frequent rain, or then the events of rain are becoming more sporadic.
Right.
So it's that balance. I think we're away from the problem of the forestry landscape seen as a water use. It is a water use activity, but we've done a lot of mitigating measures to improve our footprint on how our forestry landscape laid out. But I think as carbon sinks and our carbon tax, the quantification of that is becoming is starting to become more important. I know the carbon tax, it was gazetted, and I know the big companies in the forestry industry is working on how we do it, because you have these big mills that produce a lot of carbon, but then you also have the life cycle analysis of everything through the growing stuff. So it's there.
Right.
I don't think
we definitely also see electrification of electrification of everything happening. So I'm always curious to know, as we look at other geographies around the world, like what's that hot theme kind of like. It's pretty hot here in North America. A lot of research dollars going into it, a lot of venture cap dollars going into that climate tech space with a forestry and ag component there. So definitely interesting to hear that side. So thinking of from your seat and what you've seen, I love this conversation because you're more the forestry. And I've talked with other people more techie than, well, I shouldn't say that, still foresters by training, but you're definitely boots on the ground looking at different metrics around performance and whatnot, more in the forest operations side of things. So the question I always ask the guests of this podcast, what gets you excited over the next 1 year, 3 year, 10 year? And of course, I know a lot of people are like, oh, Kev, like 10 years, that's so far out. It's like, I can't predict that, but it's still a fun exercise. But I'm going to pose you that question, Simon, like thinking of the work that you're doing, the research you're doing, the trends you're seeing in industry with adoption of technology, some faster than slower. I'm sensing maybe a different pace than some other jurisdictions around the world, which is okay. Forestry is local. We all know that's specific to the local conditions and the economics there. But what gets you excited about the 1 year horizon and maybe the 3 year horizon? What do you see coming?
Other than finishing my PhD. No, I think the 1 year, we rapid movement towards first measurements and visualization, and how we can understand our resource better. I think there's a project that we're working on looking at how we can deal with steep slopes better. Merchandising and getting the right product off. So understanding there. So it's the visualization and measuring, taking those data to a point where we can tell our machine operator where to produce what. And it's something similar to what you had with your operational tracker component, where you could see that this site can do something better than that site. I don't think and so it's taking that information, then moving it towards, so you can almost, I think, and it's happening some in other places, but I think we can go to a point where we can almost be a fit for purpose order. You can say, I need X, Y, Z, and you can go and say, oh, well, let's do that part of our stand to produce this. And then once the stand's done, we go and we've got a blank canvas that we can then consolidate all the data that we had, refly, relook at, plan it better, looking at how we can improve our operations. So it is the precision forestry approach, is understanding what we have and dealing with it more effectively. So 1 year, I think we just building on our remote sensing base and how we can operationalize that and where the money is spent and made. 3 years on looking at sensors, how can we record more data at a high resolution? I don't know what we're going to do with all the data, but I think with our roots into data science, in our data science section, and the data science buzzword getting bigger and bigger, and how we can work with that, I think it's going to become a lot more effective. It's surprising that, I mean, we harvest 16 million. Last time I heard 16 million cubic meters or tons of timber a year on just over 1 million hectares. So it's a lot of timber, but it's still, there's definitely room to understand the resource better. And not just using it as a blanket approach. Applying precise tools to how it should be done. So I suppose my planning or mindset horizon is very limited at the moment. It's like the next few months, but I think what I'd like to do is like to immerse myself into understanding these phenomena a lot more and work with students and with projects that we can understand it better. Looking at roads and drainage and massive rainfall events, so we can actually get the timber from where it's supposed to be all weather into the mills, to the market. Make sure that timber is coming off in a better state than it was in the last rotation. There's less waste.
Well, I used to always joke it's about the right wind to the right mill at the right time, and it's interesting to hear you make that comment and more data. Some folks say, do we almost have too much data that we don't know how to actually pull information or insights from it? Time will tell type of thing. So as we wind down, thinking about that 10-year horizon. Obviously, you're in a different geography than myself. You're going into summer. I believe I'm starting to cry. I'm going into fall, winter. So if there was no COVID, I'd be trying to find a way down your neck of the woods. Loved it when I visited a couple of years ago. But thinking of 10 years out, if you're to pick that one thing based on what you're seeing now as maybe that game changer in forestry, whether it's from the operation side, whether it's from the logistics, supply chain side, is there one thing that you would pick and go like, man, this is going to totally transform our industry?
Yeah, as you were talking about it, I like the idea of the automation component of things. There's been a bit of UFRO, and I unfortunately couldn't stay awake that late last night to listen to the robotics one. It was a podcast or a webinar last night. I tried, it didn't work. At midnight last night. I know my colleagues sat up and listened to it, but it's how can we, it's once again, it's automation. So can we harness the big data sets that we have to make informed decisions? So can we give the operator or the practitioner or the forester more skills to make more effective decisions? And if AI or automation can do the better decision, then just have the person as the warm body facilitating the process through the landscape. I suppose that's where it is. It's just, unfortunately, I suppose we, as humans, we are moving further and further away from actually using our own brains, but maybe we can use our brains in a more efficient way with. Great comment. It's a consistent theme across the board. Truthfully, when I talk with different people, it's the way of the future. Automation is going to pick up more. I think by default, a lot of people worry, it's like, well, is my job at risk or something? I've always had the thesis of you might be doing a different job, but the moment someone says, you don't need boots in the forest anymore, you just throw that person overboard or whatnot. That's not going to work with forestry per se, at least right now. So thanks so much for your time, Simon. I enjoyed the conversation. I know, when we were warming up, I was joking, like, you've got your dog there, you're probably nibbling at your ankle. I'm trying to keep my kids from jumping through this green screen behind me, but this is the world we're in today. It's like we're all working from home. No. I know you mentioned you guys had a pretty hard lockdown in your neck of the woods there, and up here in Canada, at least where I am, we're starting that fourth wave, and fingers crossed that's as far as it goes, or maybe the last one, who knows. But for those of our listeners in your area or even internationally that are interested in collaborating with you and your research themes, how do they get a hold of you? Email, website, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok? Not yet. So email is ackerman@sun.ac.za. I'm sure I can email you that as well. Then
I can put that in the show notes.
Forest our website is forestproductivity.co.za, basically a website portal for everything to do with our forest productivity initiative, as well as and work that we do. We try and showcase that as much. Our live site is LinkedIn. It's Forest Operations. I think it's SU Forest Operations, but I can send the text to you properly. Sure. We try and keep that as up to date as possible. We run a Stellenbosch University Forest Operations first Thursday presentation every month.
Okay.
And that we showcase student work, researchers, international collaborators, forestry practitioners. We keep the theme forest operations, and we put a 15-minute presentation together every Thursday at our lunchtime, 1:00, which I can,
your lunchtime might be me trying to stay awake past midnight, to watch it there, though. So say, hey, my friend, it was great seeing you again. Thanks so much for joining. Stay safe, and definitely looking forward to connecting with you in person at some point in time, and hopefully at a conference. Would love to connect again. I know you guys are doing great research and working with industry. So all the best. Thanks for joining, and keep in touch.
Thank you, Kevin.
Awesome.
Yeah, stay safe too. It's a crazy world these days.
Absolutely. Will do. Take care.